questions in a certain order, but I don't always stick to it. So,
Okay, stand by. "15 seconds. We're going to run the intro."
Nine North is jumping into the community conversation on timely subject matter that's been magnified because of this current pandemic. Throughout 2021, we're going to be hosting a series of listening sessions about controversial topics that impact your community. We've titled this series Compass Programs. Today's segment is about women in sports media. It's a changing landscape, and we want to check with those women who are currently involved in the media coverage of athletics. An exciting subject for me. And the first of our guests today is Alicia Tipke. Alicia is a sports producer and anchor for WDIO in Duluth. And from high school competitors to Olympic athletes, and she covers a wide range of sports. Darian Letty, someone I've worked with, and I know she's interviewed a number of athletes from the sidelines. And Darian served as the former president of the Association for Women in Sports Media, which is a nonprofit that encourages and assists women's careers in the field of sports. During that tenure, she became a production assistant with Gopher Digital Productions, where she assists with the live broadcasts of Gopher Sports, one of our faves. Andrea Mayu spent time in Central Wisconsin, anchoring sportscasts for WSAW TV. And currently, she's a multimedia journalist covering high school sports in the Twin Cities and around Minnesota. She's produced dozens of stories on local athletes and teams and started calling games for Minnesota Prep Spotlight. Welcome, all of you, to this show. This is an exciting subject, and I can't wait for us to get started. So, we're going to just kind of alternate on who starts each time with the questions. But at the same time, I'm hoping as we go that you tell us a little bit more about your background. So let's just start out with Alicia and ask, how did sports become a career for you? Where did you start and why did you choose this field?
Sure. So I grew up playing sports. It was always a big part of my family's life. I played soccer, softball, and volleyball growing up. My family was really into football and hockey. So when I got to college, I went to the College of St. Scholastica in Duluth. I joined their athletic department as a communication assistant and got into helping live stream the games and everything that was going on there. As a smaller school, we were kind of able to live stream every game since nothing was on TV. So that was just a blast to get to experience all of those sports, and ended up getting a spot in our local market because of kind of the knowledge that I had of our local teams, and was just always something that I really loved doing, and sports was always a huge part of my life, so made it fun to transition into the work world.
It's pretty cool when you can work at something that you love so much. So yes. Darian, how about you? How did you get started in sports coverage?
Yeah, so like Alicia, I grew up playing sports. I played volleyball, a few years of basketball, some softball. I was also a cheerleader. And also like Alicia, I come from a huge sports family. My mom and my uncles all played in college. All of my cousins played. I was constantly going to watch my brother's games or my cousin's games. So sports were just a huge thing for my family and I to bond and just spend time with one another. So going into college, I was looking for a campus job that would be good to get experience with being in video, because that's what I was passionate about and I want to get more experience about that. So I got lined up with Gopher Digital Productions. And I've been there since I was a junior. So it's been about 2 years now. It's just been a great experience. I love the fast paced environment of sports. And I hope I can continue to do this after I graduate.
All right. Andrea, tell me how you ended up in this sports world.
Well, my journey kind of winds a bit. I started working actually in broadcast news. Started as a writer, worked my way up to producer, and worked in the New Orleans market to begin with, and then made my way back to the Twin Cities. I'm originally from here. And I grew up playing sports just like the other two ladies here. Soccer was my first love, basketball. I golfed. My parents loved, baseball, football, hockey. We were sports fanatics. Just we're always going to games on weekends, and so that's kind of my background. And I always envisioned that I'd marry the two together: my passion for journalism, storytelling, and get into the sports world. And my journey just started on that news side. I would say until about 2011, I decided to go back to school, got a master's degree, and kind of, because journalism has changed too, so learned some new skills and then made the transition from there, and interned back here in the Twin Cities at KSTP TV. That's when I hopped over to Wisconsin, WSAW, and I spent some time there anchoring and reporting there, covering everything from high school sports to, the Green Bay Packers, and then came back to the Twin Cities and decided to jump into freelance. And I've been working with School Space Media and Minnesota Prep Spotlight now for almost 5 years. So it's been an incredible opportunity, and one I've been able to cover high school here in the Twin Cities and watch a lot of great local athletes and tell a lot of great stories too. So that's kind of my journey in a nutshell.
That's a big nutshell.
Yeah, I know. It's a lot to get in there.
So let's just say right away, there are not a lot of women in sports media, in media at all. And through the years that I've been teaching, that's one of my goals always, is to get more women involved, all the way from pulling cables to, appearing at an anchor desk. So that doesn't just happen. It might happen more for males than it would for any women that we know. A lot of times there's somebody along the way that made that happen for you. There's a mentor, maybe a teacher or a coworker or something. I'd like to hear a little bit about who it was that helped make this happen for you. And Darian, let's start with you. Who was a mentor for you?
Wow, there has been so many. I don't think we'd have enough time for me to name them all. But first of all, let me start with giving a shout out to my mom. She is a huge sports lady. She, like I said, plays sports in college. She played volleyball at one school, then transferred to another and played basketball. So she really instilled in me that women have a place in sports and it's a place to be really successful. And she'll get mad at me if I don't mention this. She scored 1,000 points in basketball in high school without a 3-point line. So that's very impressive. But yeah, as I moved into college, I've come across so many amazing mentors. Amanda Stromquist, she's the engineer at Gopher Digital Productions, and she is just a whiz behind the computer. She works so quick and has always been very encouraging for me to try new things and step out of my comfort zone. She's been a great role model for me. Two others, women, Leah B. Olson, she does sideline reporting for the Lynx. She's just a huge inspiration for me, and her ability to connect with athletes and the audience is very inspirational. And just a few months ago, I met Sloan Martin. She is a radio person for the Lynx as well. And she just does an incredible job too. Her commentary is great. She's an amazing voice, and I got the pleasure to commentate alongside her for a Gopher women's basketball game. which was just another great experience. She shared a lot of great insight and advice along with all these women that I mentioned that I will continue to carry with me as I enter my career.
How wonderful. I love to hear that there are people in the business who feel like it's even their responsibility to support people who are starting out. So that's great. Andrea, tell us a little bit about how you ended up there and who helped you or inspired you.
Yeah, I think when I was first getting into, well, when I was in news and certainly when I was starting to think about getting into sports, there weren't a ton of women, working in the field. And especially, I mean, there were reporters, but there weren't the people like you're talking about, the women in the background, running cables or photographers, or you just didn't see very many. I did have one woman who I considered kind of to be the inspiration and the spark to go after my goal, my dream to work in sports. And her name is Hale. She was actually my anchor in the mornings. I was a morning news producer for a while, and she was an amazing anchor, a great reporter in New Orleans. And she also did the same thing. She made the jump to sports reporting, and now she is the Fox Sports New Orleans, or well, now Bally Sports New Orleans reporter for the Pelicans. And she covers, she works for NFL, and she covers the Saints. And I mean, she's traveling all over covering pro football on Sundays. So when I decided to make the jump, I reached out to her, and she kind of told me her story and how she made it work. And she had been a good sounding board while I was also working in New Orleans, and she was in the anchor chair. And I knew I wanted to report and be outside of the studio, and she was always a good sounding board, always there to answer questions. And I think I followed her path to start, but and so she gave me that spark to like take the risk, take the jump, and to do something different.
It's wonderful. How about you, Alicia? Is there somebody in particular or a bunch of somebodies that helped you along in your career?
Oh yeah, a bunch of somebodies sounds about right. But yeah, no, for sure. Kind of what Darian had said with the family support for sure. Growing up, I never felt like I was out of place in the sports world. My brother was always trying to teach me his sports, even though I wasn't good at those. But it was nice for him to include me. And my mom always made sure that we had, what we needed to succeed in athletics. But especially just at my college job, my boss always wanted to teach me as much as he could. He kind of knew what the sports world would maybe want from us. So he kind of took me under his wing and taught me a lot of the editing, like that kind of behind the scenes information that needs to be known, that you kind of mentioned not a lot of women are necessarily in these days. And then at my station, when I first started, our weekend sports anchor, she is now my sports director. And I'm the weekend sports anchor now. And it was nice to have her there, like see a woman right there in the office with me, and then to definitely learn underneath her too. And she had a lot of skill and information to share. And it's fun now. We're an all women sports department, and that's kind of rare. And so that's been really, really fun. And to have her share, her name's Chelsea Brown, to have her share like all of her knowledge with me too it's been a blast. So just to learn from all these people, there's lots to learn every day.
Well, I like you say that the department has changed and has become all women. And so, Andrea, you've had the most time in the business. Have you seen a lot of change? Have you seen women being given opportunities that maybe they didn't have before?
Yeah, I would say in the last 5 to 10 years is when I would say 5 years actually, is when I've seen the biggest shift. And it's not just more women covering games on Sunday, football games on Sunday, or sideline reporting, or in anchor chairs. You're seeing more women photographers, although, they're certainly far and few between, but you are seeing more women on the sidelines or in the dugouts as team photographers. You're seeing so many women actually leading the content creation for teams for Twitter or Instagram, or so. I mean, I've seen a ton more women in that arena behind the scenes there. yeah, and you look around, women behind cameras shooting the game highlights or the film or the footage. You are seeing more women behind the scenes that way. And to me, that speaks volumes of more women getting into it, feeling like this is a place for them. And I love that. We need women at all levels, and especially, the decision makers at the TV stations or the sports directors, or, just you branching out, besides having women at every different stage, not just on the sidelines or in anchor chairs, just kind of having women throughout it. So that we can see each other there or have advocates, or just having women at all different levels on the decision making side too. So yes, I'm seeing changes, still a lot of work to be done.
At least we're in the right direction, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, Darian, I'm interested in knowing your school experience. Are you seeing a lot more women getting into those degree programs? We're seeing more that come to 9 North to apply to be interns, which is a wonderful thing. But do you see a change in the time you've spent in school even?
Absolutely. I would say at my job right now at Gopher Digital Productions, it's probably like half girls, half guys. It's pretty evenly split. I've met so many women who are sports management majors that want to go in and work for a team, whether it's management or social media or whatever it be. And many women that want to go into the video side of things, like I kind of do. So it's definitely becoming more of a space where women are more accepted. And we'll probably touch on this later, but I have had such a great experience working in sports. I've mentioned some women who have been helpful for me and kind of role models for me, but even the men that are there as well have been really great and encouraging. And they've definitely just made it a great environment for women to feel empowered in such a male dominated field, although it is becoming less male dominated with my generation, I would say. But yeah.
Well, and I like what Andrea had said. It's the decision makers. When we can see more females in those roles, I think it will encourage a lot of people. So, Alicia, what changes have you seen? You've been in a number of different places. Tell me what you've seen going on.
Yeah, when I was in college, there was not a lot of females in our sports. In the job that we had in sports, there was a couple, but not a ton. It was definitely the majority male dominated in school. And then when I got into the TV market here in Duluth, there were, like I said, now my TV station is an all female sports department, but we had a male news sports director, and all of the other stations. There was one other station that had a female sports director and one other station that had a female sports anchor and reporter, and that was about it. And then it was kind of fun when it turned out that there were more and more of us. Another station has hired a couple more women in sports, but it's definitely grown more. But I still find myself in press conferences where I'm the only woman in the room. I just went to the Frozen Four, and I was looking around at the press box, and not a lot of us women around. I think in the Zoom presser, I heard maybe one other female voice. So you'd still find yourself kind of alone, but it's nice to at least see that we're coming.
Yes, with lots of positives here in this discussion tonight. But I'm also interested to know. I know it's got to be a struggle, just to try to move ahead all the time in a man's world, let's say. So I'd be interested to know, and I'm sure a lot of viewers, if they're interested in looking at this for a career themselves, are there opportunities you missed? Are there things you wish you had done differently? And are there opportunities you wish would open up for people coming along behind you? We'll go back to Alicia. We just grabbed her. We'll grab her back again. What do you think? Are there things you would have done differently?
That's a tough question. I think that, man, maybe I would have, for the market that I'm in now, it's actually it was kind of a leap for them to go with the all-female sports department in the first place. So I'm just pretty proud of the decision that, our upper management had made to go with that. So I think that, I don't know if I would have done anything different in that regards, but just maybe gone for, to not think that you're less than what you are. Because sometimes, like, I was almost fearful that they wouldn't hire me because it would make it an all-female sports department. So just to not let that keep you from applying for a job, because I did apply because I had already worked for that station, but that was definitely a fear of mine, is that they wouldn't be willing to make that leap. And so that was something that had worried me in the back of my mind. So I guess for people out there, if you see something like that and there's that bug that's telling you to not go for it, just go for it. And hopefully they are willing to take that leap with you.
No, and Darian, you're still fairly new in the field and feeling your way, but I'm betting there are things you wish you maybe had done, or opportunities that maybe passed you by, or things you'd like to see happen for other people. Can you think of some specifics?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to echo what Alicia just said about experiencing self-doubt. I feel like it's probably something a lot of women in this field have experienced, and especially early on when I gained my position with Gopher Digital Productions. They had me doing a lot of building graphics, and it was a lot of just that. And I wanted to like step up and say, hey, like I want to try directing, or I want to try out like commentating or being on camera, but I just doubted myself. I felt like I wasn't ready, or I felt like I wasn't good enough, or I wasn't knowledgeable enough. But of course, when I did it like a year later, they were like, why didn't you say this sooner? Or, and now that I'm in those roles, I enjoy it so much. And I just wish that I would have taken that risk sooner and gotten over that insecurity that I wasn't like good enough for some reason. So if anything could be different for other women out there, I would say to get past that self-doubt, just that voice in your head that's telling you that you're not good enough or that you're not ready for this. Take that opportunity, because it's going to be okay, and it's probably going to go really great.
Well, and Andrea, I like something you said earlier about the women who are doing more of the technical jobs, running the cables, shooting the stuff, doing that editing, under a deadline. And I think women aren't always welcome to do anything technical, and I don't think people even think about it. I think they just assume that. So tell me other things that you can think of that maybe were opportunities that you wish you'd taken, or things that other people should be looking for.
One thing about the technical aspects and learning all these different parts of journalism or sports journalism, I say, like, go try everything. The more tools you have in your toolbox, the more someone might say, yeah, let's hire her because she may not be as skilled in this area, but she's got these other skills too. And if we need her to fill in doing this A, B, and C, she can. Or maybe a special project might pop up. And the more versatile you are, the more you might get those yeses and they might surprise you, the yeses that you might get because of those skills. So go learn as much as you can. Like, I think I've done everything in TV except direct. So that's one thing I still need to do. So maybe that's one regret I have, that I haven't like gotten in the director's chair. But really, like, I feel the same way about like the one regret that I do have early in my career is that I didn't, or some missed opportunities would be not speaking up, not jumping in at press conferences, holding back for so long because I felt like, oh, well, these people are all here doing this like years or months before me. So I need to wait in line, or I need to know when the right time, or pay my dues to be able to ask a question or to jump into the conversation. And so I had that hesitancy. And also, you just have that like self-doubt when you feel like other people are like wondering if you should be there. Sometimes you put that on yourself too. So then it kind of translates into that holding back. And I learned through time and experience, but I wish I would have just jumped in and ripping the band-aid off, so to speak. And sometimes you're going to mess up, and sometimes you may sound, I don't know, maybe you don't ask the greatest questions, but there are tons of guys out there too that I feel like sometimes there are tons of questions that get asked and you're kind of like, well, that was kind of a different question. But it's just go in, jump in, and try to, yeah, get past that like self-doubt, because the faster you get through that, you're going to realize that you're supposed to be there. You know as much as anybody else does. You know, you grew up watching this sport and you probably know more than the person next to you, or you don't. But it's not a competition. You're there to learn and grow and do your job and come prepared, and you should be fine. But I definitely felt that as a younger journalist, like always having kind of this like almost reserved or hesitancy to take a risk. And I think that also kind of translates into now with the pandemic and working for Prep Spotlight. I was a freelance reporter and I put stories together for our show. Our show was put on pause. And I was like, well, what am I going to do now? We have play by play people, but I've never done that before. So there was that hesitancy to jump into something that I've never done before. Now I'm calling games and I'm loving it. So it's all kind of taking a risk and trying something new, and you never know what you might find. So
I think that's all so true. I know, well, in every field I've ever worked in, so many times the guys will just jump in there. You know, they have some kind of automatic self-confidence or something, or they aren't afraid to fail.
yeah.
I think that's part of it. That
There are people too that do have that fear, and we realize that we're just part of that too. We're all one and the same. So
Yep. And I also want to talk a little bit about one of the things you just brought up. And this is something that everybody who's in the audience, all the viewers want to know about the pandemic and how it has changed sports coverage. You know, you hear some, you see some, you know, you see more nose sitting next to a thing and somebody's in a different city and whatever. But it's really hard to imagine being removed from your subject and still having to cover it. So, Alicia, tell me what changes have happened for you in the last year and how maybe you've overcome those.
Yeah, it's been a lot of changes. When the pandemic first shut sports down last March, I was at the state basketball tournament down in Minneapolis, and we had to pack up our bags and go home. We had two local teams that were still gunning for a state title, and they also had to go home too, and that was pretty tough. We all went back to the Northland, and then everything just stopped, and it was a big shift from covering the games to really finding those nitty gritty local interest pieces. We really focus more on the athletes themselves, on the teams themselves, and we kind of had to shift everything that we had known into doing something with nothing, make something out of nothing. It was a lot. And then when things kind of started coming back, I mean, we actually really grew to love doing those feature pieces and those stories that we used to never have time for, because there was so many games happening at once that it was almost impossible to do that. And then we kept that up once things came back, and it really did change how we handled that, because we just didn't want to give it up anymore then, because we liked being able to tell their stories. And so we continuously kept up those kind of featuries, and we got our highlights, and we were just far more willing and likely to make time for interviews with coaches and players. And especially with Zoom, it's really difficult to, you know, give up the locker room interview, but then almost the convenience of having Zoom means that, well, hey, now I'm going to talk to you. And I wouldn't have been able to drive an hour and a half. Our coverage area is so big that now I can talk to you, and I can talk to you in 5 minutes instead of 3.5 hours. So that was a big change. And I mean, I like it. I think it's something that's not really going to go away. Especially with the NCAA, the Frozen Four. I mean, it was a bummer not being able to go into the locker room and interview those players. But on the other hand, I mean, all of those interviews are then available for anyone to view on the media website. So that's super handy too. So that's just kind of what I've noticed so far.
So it's all about adapting. Yeah. So Darian, tell me, especially like with the Gopher sports, what changes you saw, and Alicia found opportunities out of that. And we all know that after this last year, everything has changed, and nothing is going to go back exactly the way it was before. But what have you seen in this last year?
Yeah, so like Alicia said, when it's started about a year ago, everything just shut down. So there was a whole lot of nothing going on for a long period of time. Then sports started to come back, and we were making lots of adjustments. Obviously, in the control room, we double mask and we have barriers set up between all of us. But the show is completely different. I don't know if you guys have ever seen a sporting event with no fans, but it is very awkward because there's no applause, there's nothing going on in the crowd, and that's what we would normally shoot. We would shoot people dancing in the crowd, or play fun games on the big screen and things like that. That just wasn't happening. So like Alicia said, we had to focus a lot more on the athletes and their stories. So before the games, we were producing like pregame shows where we would have interviews with the coaches and the athletes and fun little things like that. And I honestly see that as a positive coming out of this. Sometimes sports can just get so monotonous and just all about the numbers and scores and stats and things like that. When we forget these are real people and they have cool stories, incredible stories. And it's our job to share those. So that's been a lot of fun coming out of this.
Wow, very positive.
Good coming out of it.
Now, Andrea, you lost your show
Yeah.
because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
But tell me, you told us a little bit about what happened after that, but explain to us how it's changed your career.
Yeah. So I've always been someone, I love going out and I love shooting video and I love the writing process and editing and putting together stories that go beyond just a minute and a half that you get in a traditional broadcast. So our feature pieces would be like 3 to 4 pieces longer form. And so it was a really, now looking back and kind of looking at all the stories that I've done over the past 5 years, I miss it. I miss the storytelling part. But like I said, I've thrown myself into another area of sports through play-by-play. And of course, during the pandemic, when fans weren't allowed in to watch games, what did they do? They would go online to watch their athletes, sons, daughters, grandkids play. And so there was a need there. And so our company was there to step in, and we took on a lot more game streams through the pandemic, and got a little crazy sometimes in terms of scheduling and getting packs of gear to people and trying to find, camera operators. And there was a great need for it. And so in that way, it felt very fulfilling in that, like, this is something that people are wanting. They want to watch their kids play the sports once it started happening again. So that was very cool to be a part of that. And like I said, so fun to learn a new skill. Although, you're like, oh man, I don't know how this goes. Am I doing this right? But you find your voice and your rhythm, and you're like, some games you're like, I knocked that out of the park. That was awesome. It also gave us an opportunity because we didn't have the show to produce a documentary on last year's Eden Prairie's boys basketball team. They were perfect throughout the season. They're most likely going to win the 4A state title. They've never won a state title in the history of the school. And last year's team just had a really special story. We were able to do that for someone who pitched the idea to us that they wanted this documentary made. So we did that. And that was also something in my bucket list, making a documentary someday. So got the first one under my belt. Through this opportunity, the pandemic, when it first hit, you feel like opportunities are shrinking, you lose the show, you kind of feel hopeless. But if you're creative and you have your eyes open and you say yes to opportunities, they're there. So a couple of things that I learned through it. So
I can see why all 3 of you have been so successful in this career for yourselves. I just want to wrap up with just a little question that I'm hoping each of you has a wonderful answer for. I'm going to start with Darian. Do you have a special sports moment that's a favorite for you that you covered, something that you'll always remember and glad you were part of?
Yeah, definitely. One that comes to mind right away is this past season, the Gopher women's gymnastics team. We hosted the Big Ten tournament and then we ended up winning it too. And that was just a blast. I had worked a lot of their games leading up to it, and I saw the gymnasts just improve and, really hone in on their skills. And when they posted final scores, the room was just electric. It was so cool to finally see all their hard work pay off. And I love watching gymnastics. The Gophers women's gymnastics team is so great. And I got the pleasure of doing a story with them, actually. So I got to talk to the coach and the athlete. And just after that conversation and then seeing their success kind of just came full circle. And it was great.
Well, I think we all know that gymnastics is one of the hardest sports to cover because there's so many events going on at the same time. And they're at the Nationals this weekend, correct?
Yes.
Go for women. So
Let's hope.
we'll root for them. Andrea, do you have a special one that you can remember that will stay with you?
Covered. Well, I would say most recently, it would be 2 years ago now, and it's part of this Eden Prairie documentary, and so maybe that's why it's like fresh in my mind. But Eden Prairie and Minnehaha Academy, which was the #1 boys team in 3A, and of course like chock full of D1 commits and Jalen Suggs at the time. They played at Minnehaha Academy. The game was sold out starting at 4:30 in the afternoon. I mean, the fire marshal was there. It was packed to the rafters, and it was an incredible game. And Eden Prairie ended up beating Minnehaha, which was kind of shock to some people because Minnehaha was just that good and star-studded. But then kind of off of that, I think it's following athletes like Jalen Suggs or Paige Beckers. I had the opportunity to do a story on Paige and Jalen when they were here playing high school sports here before the rest of the country really didn't know who they were unless you were like a diehard or, you followed high school basketball. To follow them as they are growing up and playing high school sports, and we get to watch them here and cover their games and tell their stories, and then to see them on the national stage and do what they did at the freshman level, I don't know, there's something special there that I feel having the opportunity to cover athletes and talent like that and people. They're both great people as well. And I can't wait to see what they do later, going to the WNBA, NBA, what's next for them. So that to me is something that really sticks out in my mind as like some really great sports moments.
Great. Alicia, how about you? What do you remember most fondly?
Let's see, off the top of my head, at least, I covered I think it must have been the 2019 Minnesota State boys basketball tournament, since the boys didn't get there last year, unfortunately. But one of our local teams, Northwoods, was making a run in the basketball tournament, and they had in the earlier rounds hit a buzzer beater 3 to win, and then they made it to the Target Center in the next round. It was the semifinals then, and they were fighting real hard, and it looked like they were potentially going to lose, and they crawled their way back, and then the same kid hit a buzzer beater 3 again to push them into the finals. And I mean, it was just so fun to see, because that town is like an hour and a half away from Duluth, and just to see how many people drove down to the Twin Cities, to Minneapolis, to watch their family, to watch their kids, to watch just a team that they love to cheer for. And to have this kid hit these 2 kind of miracle baskets. They did end up falling in the championship game, but it was just so fun to see the following that they had and how much support that they really had. And when I was driving out of town, somebody had had hailed me and said, thanks so much for making the trip. We're heading all the way back up there. We came down for them too. So that's something that I think will always stick with me because it was so exciting and so fun to see the community rally behind this team.
Great. Well, I hope we all have lots more great sports memories as time goes by. I want to thank the three of you so much for joining us. I'm hoping that lots of young women and even older women, it's never too late. I can tell you, it's never too late to start television. And will watch this and maybe tell somebody else about it, and that we will get more and more enthusiastic, hardworking young women, smart ones who love sports and want to share that with other people. So I'm glad you three came to share it with us tonight. So thank you so much. And I'm going to say, thanks for joining Compass 9 North. We will have a whole series of these types of shows where we have conversations about important things that affect our communities. So thank you for joining us, and everybody have a wonderful evening.